Let's look at when to liquefy and solidify an identity. So on the one hand, you have dissolving an identity, which is in preparation for a new identity. On the other hand, we have hardening or strengthening an identity. And an identity is a pattern. It's a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. And an identity in a given ecology, meaning you have reality, and then you have your pattern of thinking, your pattern of feeling, your pattern of speaking, your pattern of doing, and your pattern of being. Now, this interacts with the ecology, and it produces a probability field. If you act like this in this cult or culture, if you think like this and speak like this in this cult or culture, if you act like this in this ecology, in this natural environment, there is a probability of the following. For example, if you take a little stick and you strike the little stick on a rock, and the little stick has a chemical compound on the end that causes it to ignite, right? If you strike those two, you get a flame. If you drop the stick on the ground in dry summer weather with lots of carbon, etc., and leaves, around on the ground, if you do that 1,000 times, one of those times you're going to get a fire. And if you watch the fire rather than putting it out, one of those times it's going to get bigger. And if you keep watching, it'll get bigger, right? And then you have a fire. And if sometimes the wind is blowing towards you, now you've got a fire moving towards you. And sometimes it's not. And so there's an ecology, right? And your interaction with that ecology produces a probability field that plays out. Now, intelligence is measured by the efficiency with which a human being transforms energy, time, money, attention, natural resources, into well-being, into sustainable well-being, right? Sustainable well-being is a higher form of intelligence than unsustainable well-being, right? In other words, to be positive and excited about life, it takes more intelligence to do that through rich and meaningful friendships, right, and purposeful work, than it does to do that with cocaine, right? Right. It doesn't take a lot of skill to take cocaine and feel better. It doesn't take a lot of skill. It does take a lot of money, at least in our cult, where we ban the freedom to consume substances, but it doesn't take a lot of skill. And the yield is short, right? After a day or two, you need more, right? Or it tapers off. And then you need more. So it's a short, unsustainable yield that doesn't require a lot of skill, right? Whereas forming rich and meaningful relationships that are win-win on multiple dimensions, it requires more skill. So intelligence is the efficiency with which we generate sustainable well-being, right? That's the measure of intelligence. And we do that with our identity. The identity or pattern of energy that we identify with, that we attach to, that we say, that's me, and so we keep doing it, right? So we attach to a pattern, right? That's our ego, that's our sense of I, and that produces a probability field. And that probability field creates a certain amount of well-being and a certain amount of suffering. Every identity, every pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being creates a certain amount of sustainable well-being in a given ecology, a culture, a cult, a physical environment, and a certain amount of suffering, right? Because no pattern, no identity is perfect. Right? It can always be improved. You can always generate more sustainable well-being with less energy. Right? So that's the ideal. The ideal is an endless amount of sustainable well-being for ourselves, our ecology, and all the people around us that want that. That's the ideal, with little or no energy at all, right? Taking very little time, little or no money, very little natural resources consumed in order to generate maximum sustainable well-being for ourselves, our planet, and everyone around us that wants us. That's peak intelligence. That's a state of grace, right? But we're always some distance, right? In very dumb cults or cultures, you consume vast amounts of time, vast amounts of natural resources, and large sums of money to create chronic and unnecessary suffering for ourselves, those around us, and our planet, right? That's low level of intelligence, right? But someone with incredible skill, incredible grace, incredible competency creates vast amounts of sustainable well-being for themselves, their ecology, and those around them. And that is the measure of their intelligence, right? People say, oh, they're so smart, right? Well, smart doesn't necessarily mean intelligent. You can be really, really smart at creating a nuclear bomb that blows you and those around you up while destroying a large part of the natural ecology out of which you emerged. And you could say, oh, that was so clever, but it's not intelligent, right? And so intelligence, the ultimate metric, the meaningful metric of intelligence is how efficiently are you and those around you, how efficiently is your cult or culture at generating well-being with the resources available to it, right? So an identity is the vehicle, the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being at a cult or cultural level, at a family level, the reduced fractal level is the family, at the individual level, the fractal reduction of the family is the individual, right? You've got the micro and the macro, right? And the majority of individuals reflect the majority of families, which reflect the majority, the dominant patterns within the cult or culture. So the cult has an identity, a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. The family has a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that echoes the cult, that defaults to the cult. And the individual has a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that echoes, that defaults to the family, and thus to the cult or culture. So when to liquefy an identity, a pattern that we attach to, we say, that's me. Well, right, it all depends on the alternative. And the alternative depends on two things. One, the network effect, and two, the intelligence of the alternative, right? Because identities are on an infinite intelligence continuum, right? So, for example, we could say that, if we were to upgrade our identity to get a massage every day, we could say that perhaps the well-being of the cult or culture would go up, right? That everyone gives everyone else a 20-minute massage every day, right? So whatever the system is, right? Maybe it's the first person you meet at 7 a.m. who's in front of you. That you give that person a massage, and it all works around, and everyone gets a massage, right? Well, if that boosts the net sustainable well-being, and it's not necessarily sustainable, right? Because It exists in an ecology. But let's just say that on balance, the well-being of the culture improved by 10% by that action. Then the culture would be 10% more intelligent if it had the initiative to generate the behavior that would lead to a 10% increase in well-being, right? And it's always the problem, right? The problem of stupidity, right? Because if you were really smart, if you were really intelligent, right, you wouldn't be stupid, right? But if you're stupid, you can't figure out how to be really intelligent. And if you were really intelligent, you wouldn't do the stupid thing to begin with, and you wouldn't have any problem not being stupid in that particular way, right? And so we're always kind of seeing and at the level that we are capable of being at, right? We could all be healthier, happier, wealthier, more alive. We could all give more. We could all laugh more, right? We could all be a little bit better. But we're the way we are, right? Which is better than we could be and not as good as we could be. We're at a threshold. We're at a level on the infinite continuum of intelligence, and we're at the level that we are able and willing to be at. And that's our identity, our pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. So we want to liquefy an identity. We want to dissolve our pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, and create something more intelligent. We all want that. And the question is, when's a good time? And when's a good time? Like, when do you want to iterate, right? Because in order to change from one pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being to another pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, you've got to dissolve the pattern. You've got to collapse the status quo, the cult, the culture, the identity. You've got to collapse that. And then you've got to put something in its place. You've got to put a new pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being in its place that is more intelligent. Well, you have to put a new pattern in. And the question is, the new pattern, is it going to be more intelligent or less intelligent than the old pattern? But this has two components that makes it a little bit more complex. The first is just the raw kind of first principles analysis of the identity, right? So, for example, in our cult or culture, we go around saying, hey, how are you? And the answer is pretty much, okay, fine, whatever, right? We don't take 2 or 3 hours to actually answer the question, because it would take at least 2 or 3 hours to answer that question, right? Well, my pinky's a little sore. I'm wondering about this and that. I'm still feeling a little stung at what my sister did on the phone yesterday. This stock is doing good in my portfolio. This isn't, right? You can go on endlessly with actually how you are. But in our cult, we just say, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? I'm fine, right? So that's the cult, right? Now, it might be that to go into a little bit more detail would be intelligent, to actually say, well, rather than say, how are you, why don't you ask something specific? Like, is your work becoming more profitable or less profitable in the last month? You ask something specific, and I'll give you a specific answer. And you figure out what you actually want to know. You figure out what you want to know, and I'll answer it. And I'll actually give you an honest answer. Like, that could be something that takes 20% more time, but actually increases the sustainable well-being of the network, which is the group of people doing that protocol. Well, let's say that there would be a 5% increase in the entire group's well-being if we switched the protocol from "how are you, I'm fine" to "tell me about how your arm is feeling since the last injury," or "tell me how you're feeling about the news and what you saw." To ask a specific question and give a specific answer. Well, if nobody else changes that in the network, people say, "Hey, how are you?" And you say, "Well, what would you like to know in particular?" And they say, I don't know, just how are you?" And you say, "Well, I could tell you about my body. I could tell you about this." And they say, "Never mind." And they avoid you. And so does the next person. And so does the next person. Let's say that 9 out of 10 people avoid you because you asked them for a little bit more intimacy and vulnerability and precision, a little more excellence. So 9 out of 10 people don't ask you how you're doing. They just avoid you. And then one person has a good conversation. Now, what you've done in that dynamic is you've increased the intelligence of the protocol, of the interaction, by, let's say, 300%. Because "how are you? I'm fine. I don't actually want to know how you are, and I'm not actually fine." Right? It's a complete meaningless waste of time. To I'm now, gathering and disseminating, useful data. Right? Don't ask if it's not useful. Just go on with your life. If it is useful, ask for what's useful, and I'll give you real data. Right? So you've maybe increased the intelligence of the pattern of speaking and thinking and feeling in that area by 350%. But you've simultaneously reduced your network from 100% down to 10%. 1 in 10 is actually connecting with you. So your network has just shrunk by 90%. But the quality of your interaction with the remaining 10% is 350% higher. Now, that was over that one interaction. But what if, because the person doesn't want to ask how you're doing, they cross the street and now you don't get to see and learn about all kinds of interesting other bits of data where, let's say, the other 90% make a little bit more sense in that other area. You're dealing with 10% of your original network, right? Well, the power of the network or the size of the network has a tremendous amount of impact on your probability field. Like if you hold a garage sale and 10 people come, you have a much higher likelihood of selling things than if one person comes, right? So if 9 people don't come to your garage sale, which is part of the network, right? It isn't a garage, and it's probably not a great sale, but that's the protocol, right? You want to move things out of your space and get some money and have some social interaction, and they want to get things cheap and have some social interaction, so you have a garage sale. Well, if they don't come to your garage sale because you actually answer the question how you're doing, and they don't want to know, well, the fact that you have a 350% better protocol for communicating and around how you are and how the other person is offset by the reduction of flow in a more limited network. This person doesn't want to interact with you because you did this. This person doesn't want to interact with you because you did that. And the thing is, the less intelligent the network, the more conformist it is, right? Because someone who has no brain and just instinct has nothing to go by other than, let's copy the people around us. That's what apes do, right? That's what children do. My mom's speaking English, I'm going to speak English. Why? They're not evaluating that. My mom is speaking, some obscure Egyptian language. Well, the kid will just learn Egyptian, right? And then they'll have no network, right? Someone will say something in English, they'll say in Egyptian, I don't understand. And that'll be the end of the interaction, right? So a child or someone with only instinct copies their network without question. And, a childlike, a cult-like network doesn't question the foundation of the cult, the memes of the cult, the identity of the cult. It just is them. That's me. I believe that the world is a giant turtle and that the god Yoma is going to turn the turtle upside down every 1,000 years and life will start all over again. Where did you get that idea? Well, that's what they say at the church, right? Okay. Have you thought of any other stories? No. So it's just, that's what they said, and that's the way it is, right? So in highly unintelligent cults, first of all, there's lack of evolution. There's self-referential, let's reference the past. We're doing this because we did it, and we did it because it must have been a good idea at some point, and so that's why we did it. And now we're doing it because we did it. We did it because, people before did it, and so that's why we're doing it. There's not a lot of room for change and growth in that narrative, right? It's a self-referential copying, cloning dynamic. Take that, copy it, take that, copy it. No iteration. A highly intelligent culture questions everything. Maybe we shouldn't imprison 2% of our population at $100,000 apiece. What if we took a few $1 trillion a year and put that into minimizing childhood trauma? Just made our culture traumatically literate. It seems like the worst offenders in prison had severe traumatic abuse histories. So why don't we actually spend the money reducing the abuse histories in our children and infants than shaming the worst victims of childhood abuse? For example, right? That's a question. It's not the ultimate answer. Nothing is. But what if we ask that question and did a sample? Let's take 1 million people and do that. And then we'll the other 400 million people will just continue arresting them for playing out childhood traumas as traumatically illiterate adults. Let's just do that, for example. So let's do that. And the question is, if you're going to get stoned to death by people whose only reference is you've deviated from the norm, we don't like you. Why? Because if you're a child, if you're a member of a cult, if you do anything different, the question is not, is that more or less intelligent than what we're doing? The question is it different? And if it's different, right, preventing childhood abuse rather than incarcerating, delinquents, that's different. That's different. You say, that's different. You're not one of us. Why? Because we all do this. And we do this because we do this, and that's why we do this, right? And you're not one of us. Why? Because you're doing something different. You're doing something different. Get out, right? So there is a tremendous value in being part of a large network, right? Because your possibility field, your probability field is much higher. Right? If you are a network of one, right? Clear everyone out of the country, just you, right? You want to get a piece of pizza. Well, go out, harvest the wheat, take the wheat back, cook the wheat, grind the wheat, go out, find some yeast, right? You've got a year's work just to get pizza. It's a very inefficient experience to be a network of one. Now, in a free market network, in a capitalist network, right, you have everyone vying for dollars. So as long as you've got dollars, or whatever the dominant currency is of the day, well, then you just give that, and you've got all these people helping you. They're part of your network economically. If you're ostracized, you become a network of one, right? But the entire network weakens as it gets smaller, right? So one of the big choices that we all need to make is between the intelligence of our identity and the size of our network, right? Giant, dumb networks often win out in sustainable well-being over highly intelligent identities of one, highly intelligent cultures, patterns of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, being that no one else understands except you, right? And so that's a big tension between the intelligent minority and the powerful majority. Right? Power comes from the ability to act. That a lot of that has to do with cooperation, right? 1,000 people can push over a tree. Right? One person might push for 1,000 years and the tree doesn't fall over. But 1,000 people can push over a tree in 5 minutes. Right? So there's a power to the network, right? And so that's part of the decision. And so the question about whether or not to dissolve your identity, to liquefy your identity and form a more intelligent identity depends then on two things. One, do you know a more intelligent identity to replace it with? Do you have a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being in mind that is an upgrade? Now, and how good is your data, right? Do you have a hunch that it's an upgrade, an intuition? Have you seen other people doing that and like, oh, they're doing that, that's an upgrade? Or is it, I have no idea what I'm going to do, but I hate who I am. I hate what we're doing here. I hate this thought, this feeling. I want to just get rid of my identity. And then I'll figure something out, right? Well, when you neutralize, you've got an endless amount that it can get worse. And you've got an endless amount that it's going to get better. But if you do nothing, it tends to get worse. If you just lose your identity, forget who you are, I don't know, I don't have a job, I forget my skills, I don't do it. Generally, in a cult or culture, generally, you're going to go down, right? It's a little bit like your body. Oh, I don't like this thing here, right? I got this tooth thing here. I want that tooth thing, right? So let's just dissolve the body, right? But what are the odds if you just, put acid over and just dissolve the whole body? What are the odds that it's going to be better, more beautiful, more symmetrical than the body that was imperfect, right? So when you liquefy something, you need something in mind, and this often suggests making smaller incremental changes rather than giant changes, right? So that you're not in complete chaos, for example. That's one thing. But the other thing you have to analyze is how many people in my current network will this alienate, right? I get together with fat people every month. And we all talk about trying to lose weight. We have a great time, laugh, do all this. If I get skinny, I'm not going to be welcome there, right? I'll be resented, right? Because we're the fat people that get together and talk about being skinny, right? If I'm a poor person, we all get together and bitch about rich people and I get rich, well, I'm not going to be welcome at that table, right? Oh, it's all right for you, the rich, right? But we did. No. You read the book, Think and Grow Rich. You study a useful specialized skill. You work really hard at it. You become the best at it. You work long hours, and then you invest the money, and then you become rich in about 10 years. I don't know. The rich were born with... No, I wasn't born with a silver spoon. Get out of here, right? We're the poor people, right, that bitch about rich people. And rich people are not welcome, right? But on the other hand, we're the rich people that bitch about poor people. Now I have a new group, a new network, right? Oh, these employees. They think these companies just grow on trees? They think, they just take 1,000 staples from the stapler, and then the company just has an endless amount of inventory, and come late, and now they have this, and now they can't get to work on this. It's like, oh my goodness, 1,000 people all complaining about all their stuff, right? Ugh. These poor people. Why don't they be rich, right? Like us, right? So if you change your pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, you will have different results. And you will find that you're part of a smaller or larger network. And you'll find that you're often part of a different network, right? Part of a different network, right? The poor people don't want to gripe around you when you're rich. So they either shut up, right? But you can't be part of that. You don't really belong, meaning you're not cloning that network, right? And the Democrats, if you believe in democracy, if you go and help a dictator, improve the science of dictatorship, you don't really fit in that network. And similarly, right? If you leave the dictator and you come over to the democracy, and they explain how, the average person knows who's the best leader more than anyone else, right? Well, why did you why did you vote for this person? Well, you all agree they're very dumb, right? So why is democracy so good, right? Well, you're just not welcome at that table. As soon as you ask the question, as soon as you leave the network, there are networks of belief. There are networks of monetary exchange. $1 is a network, right? If you have $1, you can have more options than if you have Thai baht, right? You walk into Walgreens in the United States, and with $1, they'll sell you whatever you want, right? But you walk in with a Thai baht. You say, well, it's useful in this place. Well, they say, go over there, right? Yeah, that's not what we want here, right? So the currency, the mental currency, the emotional currency, the habitual currency, we dress like this, we don't dress like that. That's all part of the network compatibility. If you load a piece of Apple software on an IBM, on a PC, it doesn't work, and vice versa, right? And so that's often the tension there, right? At least there was a time when Apple built better software and better computers, but it was a smaller network and they were more expensive. So did you want the best software and pay more money and have fewer people you could share files with? Or did you want the crappier software that most people had, right? So, and that's cheaper, right? So which network do you want to be a part of, right? There's this cellular network. Well, if you've got free calling with all these people in your network, and it's, 70% of the population, that's a better network than to have free calling with 5% of the population, right? So 5% of the people, if there's a 5% chance if you want to free call someone, they'll take your call, right? So, but it's a cheaper phone plan, and it has a better signal. But you've only got free talk and text with 5%, right? This is the network and the intelligence dynamic. Another way of saying that is that if you have a pinball and a bowling ball, this is a little bit similar. It's called the law of mass, right? If you've got a pinball and a bowling ball, and the pinball is going in that direction, and the bowling ball is going in that direction, the pinball is the lone individual, and the bowling ball is the crowd, is the group. Well, when those two collide, the bowling ball, the law of mass, dictates that the bowling ball always wins. That when the pinball hits the bowling ball, it bounces off, changing its identity, its trajectory, and the bowling ball just continues where it was going, right? When a tank hits a mini and they're going in opposite direction, the tank drives over the mini or pushes it forward, and the mini stops, right? Because it's smaller. But this is the discrepancy between the law of mass, which is that the majority, the larger energy wins, and the law of intelligence, which says that a minority always has the best identity, the best technology. The newest and greatest technology is held by a distinct minority of people. The older, the norm, is held by the bigger, the majority of people, which means that if a cliff is happening right here, and the pinball is going away from the cliff, and the bowling ball is going towards the cliff, the bowling ball wins the fight and knocks the pinball back over the cliff and then falls over the cliff itself. But the pinball was right. The pinball was heading away from danger in the right direction, but was swept up in the crowd that didn't know what it was doing, right? The brightest, smartest, most intelligent thinkers are a very small minority, and they're often swept up by the majority. You can think of Galileo and the Catholic Church. Galileo is one guy with a telescope. The Catholic Church has the rule of God, hundreds and thousands of people, and they've got fear. If we tell you all to kill Galileo despite the 10 Commandments, or to excommunicate Galileo, etc., then Galileo's dead. Galileo's excommunicated. But he was right. And the church was an idiot. The church was wrong. It doesn't matter, though. In tensions of force, the majority always wins. The minority is always right. But we have to distinguish between two minorities. The minority is always right, but there are two minorities. There's the minority that's lagging behind, that's less intelligent than the majority. And there's the minority that is leading the way, that is more intelligent than the majority. And it is the more intelligent minority that is always right. And it is the majority, the mediocrity of the majority, that's always lagging behind, that's always wrong. Relative to that majority, which at one time was a minority. So you want to liquefy your identity. One, when the amount of benefit, when the step up in intelligence of the new identity, the new pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being is so much better, that it is worth the effort of the change, one, because it takes energy to dissolve an identity and energy to form a new identity, new habit. And you also want to do so when you can join a much bigger network cooperatively. So let's say you have an identity, you've got a language, and it's spoke by 5% of the world's population. and you can learn English, which is not a better language, but it's spoken by 55% of the world's population, let's say. Well, your network just got 10 times bigger by switching to another identity. That's a good switch because your possibility field is now 10 times bigger because you're part of a bigger network. Now, sometimes those are in tension, right? You've got a better identity, but a smaller network. And there it depends on the odds, right? It depends on, for example, do you need other people in your network? Are you going to, are you content, right? Can you do what you want to do? Happy? Are you more successful with just 5 or 10 people in a small network? That's the analysis. But if overall your well-being is better, if your intelligence goes up with the new identity so much that it compensates for being part of a smaller network, that it compensates for the time and effort to break down the old pattern and build the new pattern, and that it produces a net noticeable profit in sustainable well-being for you, others, and the world, well, that's when you want to dissolve your current identity, pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, and doing and being, and build a better one. So how do you do it, right? How do you do it? How do you dissolve an identity and recreate an identity? And we'll look at that on another video.